G'day guys, Ben and Simon and Alfie, my dog, here for the Pumped on Property Show podcast today. We're super excited to bring this one to you. I should have probably put a bib on for this podcast at the start of it because, man, I just dribbled and rambled and just went down the rabbit hole with so much data stuff that we don't normally share. But for me, I'm frothing.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Like, we started out talking about my plans for my property portfolio over the next few years because there's a lot of cool things happening. But then we just go down the rabbit hole of like really granular stuff when it comes to identifying a high quality market, identifying a quality suburb and property to invest in. And we look at some of the exciting things that we've got coming in the not too distant future as well. And little Alfie boy, he was laying behind the couch for most of the time, but you'll see towards the end of the podcast, he jumps back up and gets all excited because he must have loved what we were talking about as well.
But yeah, good fun this podcast, guys. Give us a thumbs up, give us a 5-star review as well if you enjoy it. Can't wait to catch up with you again next week. So we got a great question in the last week, which is always one of the funnest ones to answer when I think about old episodes or old videos we've done. And the question was from Dave, who I went for a couple of our walk with. And Dave's done 3 or 4 properties with us now.
3, yeah.
And he sort of said, well, what are your personal plans and goals for the next 2 to 3 years, knowing the stage of the longer term cycle we're at and knowing what's going on with our family lives. So might kick it off with you because I think you've got a bit more clarity and a bit more cool stuff coming than I do at the moment. But what are the plans for the next few years?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it actually. Like, I'm at a bit of a adding value phase of my investment journey. You know, I went really hard from sort of 2019 to 2021 in building that portfolio and just been, you know, holding it really. And now I'm coming back to those properties and really starting to make them what they really could be. And I like...
So did you buy 4 properties in 3 years? Is that what it ended up being? Like,
yeah.
I didn't realize the time frame was so condensed.
I know, right? At the time,
That's
it
crazy.
just felt like it
forever.
But it was like, you know, Crystal was doing stuff at the time, Hayden was doing stuff at the time, you were doing stuff at the time. So we all had things going, but then we've all had sort of about a 2-year downtime, and myself, Crystal, Ben, everyone is getting ready to gear up and do some more projects, which is super exciting. Like, you know, sitting on the sidelines while you're watching everything happen it's hard as an ambitious property investor. So I'm pumped to really get stuck into it. The first one that I'm doing is just liquidating some debt. So
selling a property. Liquidating debt.
That sounds a lot nicer, doesn't it?
It sounds a lot more serious.
But you know, we've got the baby on the way and Tay's going on maternity leave, so we don't have the luxury of 2 incomes anymore. And in this environment with higher interest rates, it's just we can't afford to hold all those properties. So it was, you know, a family decision, but it also allows us to free up some capacity to do a duplex on another property as well. So we'll sell one, and with the money that we make from that, it will allow us to build another property in the backyard of the one down in Logan in Regent's Park.
You know, so what you've just gone through really fast is you bought a bunch of properties, you weren't able to do something for a couple of years, and now you are again. And you're just like, yeah, I'll sell a place, I'll do a subdivision, I'll sell one, I'll keep one, then I'll sell another one. But like, in reality, like breaking that down, so selling this first property, what have you learnt from that experience already? Like, because I know you got an incredible offer in the first week, which was too good to be true. Now you're sort of 4 weeks down the line and you're just like, shit, I've got to reset my expectations around price. So how are you dealing with that and what are you planning on doing?
Yeah, it kind of hurts a little bit when you're like, you know, you set your expectations up here and then it gets taken away from you. But you know, this is life.
Worth that. And it's like, that was actually like 80 grand above what it's worth probably.
At least 80 grand above where it's worth. And you know, that it is what it is, right? And unfortunately that offer fell over. So we've been working on getting other offers, more interest on the property. I've got an amazing real estate agent, Cam McCullen, down in Redcliffe. He's an incredible guy. He's like a top performer in Clontarf and Margate where I have these properties. And he's been such an asset, right? Like, we touch base almost every single day. He's really organised everything for me. He's managing these buyers really well. Like, it's nice because I'm used to, you know, dealing with real estate agents when we're negotiating against them.
Yeah.
But it's actually working together now. And he's like, how's it feel to be on like this side of the equation? I'm like, it's really good, but
Nice that you like me right now. Because like he's going to make money from you, where normally it's like
The
we're
opposite.
trying to make money for our client, they're trying to make it for theirs.
But he's good, man. Like, he's a really good salesperson. He's a really good agent. He's from the area. He like is born and raised there. So he's got his connections and everything like that. So, you know, I have the offer that I want at the moment, but we're just playing hardball, right? So we've got the weekends open home where we're hoping to get more multiple offers and just hoping to push it up that little bit further, because it's kind of, you know, at the high sixes, low sevens right now, and just trying to play the game, right? Like, why not? We've got time. We've got one more week to deal with it. So I should have a contract signed by the time this podcast goes live as well.
Oh, that's exciting. Like, why I was laughing there, and I didn't mean to throw you off by that, but I was just thinking about how like different we both are. Like, and I think sometimes this is why like your life is like a bit more joyful, because you're just having a bit more fun with this, dude. Where like I'm selling a property at the moment too. I called her. I signed up the thing 7-8 weeks ago. I said literally, don't text me, voicemail me, call me without like a written offer that it's at least this level. And then that's it. Like, I don't like...
Too brutal.
But I've sold a few properties, and I'm just at the point now where all of my attention and time outside of helping clients at work is just for my family, because I've got the 3 kids at home. And I've traded a lot of my life before, but you know, when I sold my first property, I was like, hell yeah, like call me. I want the updates
fun.
every day. This is just a game right now, where now I'm more like, dude, like I actually just signed up another one of my properties at Mooloolaba this week too with James.
Oh, nice.
I was laughing with James because he's the owner of Ray White Mooloolaba and a friend of mine. And he's like, the very first time I got him to appraise a house, I didn't bring the keys for it. And he's like, don't worry, man, I'll jump the fence. He was wearing like $1,000 suit. He jumped over the fence and completely ripped like straight through the middle.
No.
And he's like, you're just using me, man, because I like ripped that suit. And I'm like, I'm just using you because I respect you for jumping that fence straight in that suit. But yeah, I said the same thing to him. I'm like, and he gets it because he's sold like a bunch for me now. And I'm like, dude, just tell me when it's sold. Like, I don't need anything else than that. But that's different stages of life.
Yeah, and I'm a bit of a vibe guy. Like, let's not beat around the bush. Like, I am a high energy person, and I like to have those relationships and rapport with the people that I spend time with. And like, I just want to be involved in the process. Like, I've helped people buy hundreds of properties, and I've never sold one. Yeah. So it's just like, this is my first time. I want to learn everything there is to do. And like, I do fancy myself as a decent negotiator as well. So I'm just making sure that he's saying the right words to the potential buyers as well.
Coaching your top performing agent.
Yeah, seriously though.
He's listening to this and he's like, fucking Simon.
I know. And then he's like,
alone, man.
Already done. Already done. So that one will be gone soon. And then
a decent negotiator or micromanager?
I'm a micromanager. And then the next step, and this has already begun, I'm talking with brokers to secure pre-approval for a development loan or a construction loan. And working with our preferred building partner down in Brisbane to put together some designs. So what recently happened in Logan is the town plan change. You're allowed to now subdivide 700 square metre blocks if you meet the requirements for all the other little nuances associated with that, which my property does. So it's currently like a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, super low maintenance, brick and tile on a big 715 square metre block, like a 20 metre frontage, full side access, flat backyard. Like, it is the dream. And I never intended to subdivide it. I actually intended to build a granny flat in the backyard and get the dual income.
Keep it forever, right?
Keep it forever. But now that this has changed, I'm like, okay, well, I want to try developing. Let's give it a try. And you know, so many people put so much pressure on these types of decisions. But for me, I'm like, I'm going to be doing property investing for the rest of my life. I don't know, the tribe has spoken and given me this opportunity to like do it a lot easier. So I'm like, let's give it a crack. So I can build a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, completely separate house in the backyard. Then you can subdivide that and put them on 2 separate titles with a strata title on there as well. And then I'll have 2 properties instead of 1.
And you could keep them, you could sell one, keep one, or you could sell them both. And that's what you talk to your accountant about. But what's interesting to me about this, there's 2 things. One, you've been going through this like an absolute legend. Like, it's so sick to just see you cruising through it, enjoying it, because that's really what investing should be. It's like, developing's only intense if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have a great builder, town planner, and understand the process. But because you know the unknowns, it's just a process now, and you're paying the planner to like manage most of it for you, which is gold. But secondly, like the pivot in strategy, like the original strategy was buy a home, or buy 3 investment properties, either knock them down and rebuild houses with granny flats, or renovate a house and keep build a granny flat and keep them forever and have 150 grand a year of passive income for life. But now you've got a bub on the way. You're like, hey, I don't really want to sit in all this debt. Some of these properties have gone up really quickly. Things change, and that's what we've got to know as investors. Like, we're always looking into the future and trying to make the best decisions that we can, but hoping you get financially free in 15 or 30 years versus like bringing forward financial freedom through a couple of these decisions very fast is like, it's a beautiful thing, and we've got to be able to pivot and change.
And the true value of these properties has changed. And I've got to recognize that, because putting a granny flat on that property would be undervaluing the property.
It would be doing the property disservice now.
So you got to maximize that potential. So once I completed, and I was talking to the builders yesterday, and they were like, look, this will probably, if you can start in October, you'll have the keys by April.
So it could happen this quick.
It'll happen quick. Like, this is, it must happen quick. So then once I complete it, I'll probably look at selling half, keeping half. And then with that spare cash, like paying off some more debt on my own home. But I am manifesting for another development opportunity as well. So the biggest change in my portfolio is like, I still want to have 2 to 3 residential properties owned outright, generating rental income as passive income. That hasn't changed.
Just for foundational safety, financial peace in retirement.
But now I'm in this consolidation phase where I'm buying these partner properties, and I'm doing these projects to speed up the debt reduction phase, because, rather than paying off the properties with my own income and with the positive cash flow and the tax benefits and all of those things that we talked about in the most recent podcast last week, I'm also continuing to invest. I'm also buying these partner properties to speed up that debt reduction phase. So then once I've finished the one down in Logan, I'll then start another one up in Margate. And that'll bulldoze the house and then subdivide the land and build like one of those beautiful duplexes, the ones that you see in the Shire all over the place, the ones that you see on Oceanic Boulevard.
Can you do that already? Has the town plan on that block changed, or
no?
Just with what we think's coming through the pipeline?
That's what I'm manifesting.
Yeah.
And like, now we're getting the feedback from the town planners that it's like closer. And I'm still a couple of years away from starting that project. So by that point in time, I will be able to, because right now on that street, the north side closer to Redcliffe, where all of the shops and the high density locations are,
side of the road,
is already next gen zoning, which allows you to do these types of projects. I'm on the south side. We're on the south side of that road, and it's still just standard residential lots, but like the domino effect will inevitably get there at some point in time.
And we've seen it in Sydney and Melbourne, where 10, 15 years ago, 600 lots were just low density residential almost everywhere except around the train lines and the main roads. And now it's pretty much just free for all. Any 600 lot can be cut up down there. Yeah,
so that's the goal. And that's sort of, I want that all to occur over the next 2 to 3 years, because I think there is some incredible opportunity from a capital growth perspective, particularly in Brisbane. Based on all the research that we've done, based on history, these markets, these suburbs are going to do really well. So I just want to capitalize on that. And at the end of it, I'll probably hold on to 2 investment properties plus my own home. And I still won't be completely debt free at that point in time, but I'll have a really nice LVR and access to a lot of capital, so that in the future, when another opportunity comes up, I can jump onto it.
And with the one in Logan that you're going to start in October, talking to the accountant, you know, you probably sell the one at the front first because it's the older one and you've held it for longer. Are you going to keep the back one medium term, or do you think you'll rent it out for a couple of years and maybe think about selling it too?
I'm unsure, and I'm not putting a plan in place for that yet, because
see how it comes out.
It'll depend on, you know, the rental return. It'll depend on the value at the end of the project. It would depend on my serviceability at the end of the project, because if I can service the knockdown rebuild of the other duplex in Margate, I'll keep it. But if I can't, then I won't, because me and Tay have talked, and like, she just wants to be a mum, and I'm super happy that she just wants to be a mum.
Yeah.
And like, I'm sort of happy to work and do the investing and make sure that we can continue living this amazing lifestyle.
Love
and
that.
you know, she just wants to be a mum and raise our kids and make sure that, you know, hopefully they don't get damaged.
It's the most beautiful and important thing. Like, Lisa has been able to do the same thing a lot with our family. Like, we grew up at home with mum, and you know, you're good. I was a bit off the planet. So 1 out of 2 times it works out like a charm. But no, like, I think it's a good thing, man. I think that's beautiful. And like, let's just pretend we've got no crystal balls, whether it comes to property or our own lives. We never know what's going to come. But let's say that everything works out for you over the next 15 or 20 years. Like, what can you see? Like, what could it look like now?
Look, it looks like probably upgrading the principal place of residence. You know, there's
being walking distance to the surf, right?
Well, there's 2 options. So I either want to be walking distance to the surf, and a very particular surf break on the Sunshine Coast as well. Won't disclose it because everybody already knows
We
about it too
needed
much.
GFC to get into that one.
Yeah, the properties right now are like $3.5 million, and like, for me, that's more than I can chew. I can't bite that much off yet.
More than it, yeah.
So, you know, if a GFC style event comes and these properties do drop at some point in the next 10 years, hopefully I'm in a position to be able to capitalize on that. But if not, that's all good. There's 2 streets in Aruna that I effing love, and I'm keeping my eye on. There's about 10 blocks of land that I'm really happy with. And what I would love to do ideally, and if I'm thinking 20 years into the future, I'm either going to be in one of these 2 locations, but what I'd like to do is bulldoze what was there and build the dream home.
Awesome.
So I can see myself in that situation in 20 years from now. I can also see myself owning a couple of investment properties, just, you know, generating about 80 to 100K worth of passive income. And then I can also see myself in 20 years from now owning a couple of hobby things. So this will maybe be like an apartment, you know, in a place where I like to go visiting for Airbnb purposes, and also like a rural,
looking coolly on, like, for waves or somewhere.
like that. Yeah, like that. That, like, in 20 years, I can see myself owning something like that, and also a rural property as well. Because, like, you know, I'm addicted to the ocean and I spend my whole life around the ocean. But what actually grounds me and gets me back to like myself is being out west and being in the hinterland and being in nature. So I see myself having something like that. But what I've also talked about is like, maybe we I know and do best, which is just identifying the best markets, suburbs, properties, negotiating deals, doing great projects. So I'm not sure yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and this is the cool thing. Like, it's, you know, you've set up a foundation, your own home plus 3 properties at the moment. You know, soon to be your own home and 2, with upside on both of them. And it's like, you don't need to know, and I think this is something I wanted to communicate with everyone, like, you don't need to know every step to achieve freedom and an incredible life. It is okay. Like, we're not plants, we can move. And so it's okay to like continue to grow, continue to change as we move through this journey, and to go, well, my life stage has changed. You're no longer just coming out of uni, you know, buying your first properties at the start of your career with no kids and not a care in the world. Like, things have changed. Like, lifestyle is more important now than it was 3 years ago. Like, spending time with your partner and soon to be kid is like important at this stage of life. Surfing more is more important now than working 70 hours of work week like you were 3 years ago?
Yeah, so that's right. Things change, and my whole goal until my youngest is in, that doesn't exist yet. My youngest is in school, so it's like for now it's just family, and then after that I'll figure it out again.
Love that.
But like one of the things that I want to talk about in this as well is just like the gold nugget of the week, which is just the importance of having that incredible team of advisors. Like I would not be here without that. And, you know, so many people, especially in Australia, they just want to do it all themselves. They want to be the self-made man. And it's like, well, you look at any successful person, it's very rarely self-made.
There's no one that I've ever met that actually makes it. The only people that try and do it all on their own are like people that are at the start of their journey. There's nobody that's made it without standing on the shoulders of someone else to see further, and without many, many, many people around you having your back, pulling you up.
Yeah, because like, you know, you initially sparked that fire in me to start like learning about this stuff, reading the books, just realizing that real estate was a good investment. And then it flows on from there. But like, who would you say are some of the biggest assets and must-haves in your team to ensure that you have a easier journey as a property investor?
Well, I think about one that's been very helpful for both of us, but you in particular, like Pam, our town planner. And we've had many, many town planners, but she's phenomenal. She just sends you a message, hey Simon, your block's been rezoned. And by the way, the state government is now, if you do it in this time frame, going to pay for your infrastructure charge that was going to be 30 to 120K.
Yeah.
Maybe you should think about it. You're like, I'll definitely think about it now.
Exactly. And it's like,
Without
I didn't even have
know.
to probe her for that. That was just, she understands what we're doing and what we are hoping to do with the properties, and she sends that through. And it's like, my project went from costing $380,000 to $300,000. $80,000 saving overnight.
Because of a person that you paid for a $450 report when we bought the property.
Exactly.
So yeah, like I think a town plan is really important if you want to go further, and you will go further with other people. Obviously an accountant, like I've had 6 or 7 of them now, and the one that we work with, Dale, that we introduce the clients that work with us to, is world class. Phenomenal.
Oh my God. Like I walk out of those meetings just before tax time just feeling so motivated. Like he just has this energy about him. Like he's the smartest guy that you'll talk to, but he makes it seem so achievable. All of your goals is like, yeah, we can work together on this and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and he's then protecting me as well. Hey, if you're thinking about doing these things, then you should be buying the properties in these entities. If you're planning to do more developments in the future, then we need to talk about setting up the right company structure to ensure that you can keep safe as you do those projects. So once again, I don't need to think about protecting myself. I've got my team of advisors that are protecting me automatically.
I love that. Solicitors are very, very important as well.
You know that.
Building and pest inspectors are really important. Property managers are super important. Tax depreciation specialists. For those looking to go to the next level, like a buyer's agent like us can be really, really helpful as well. You know, I look at it and I go, well, I've bought X amount of properties. Our team, like the 5 of us, have bought 38 properties as a group in 14 or 15 years just for ourselves.
It's crazy.
We've bought over $500 million worth of property for other people. It's like, if you don't think that we've learnt something from that activity that could be helpful, like, and have a competitive advantage because of the way that we obsess about, like,
and we specialize as well. You know, like I like to use the analogy of like a GP, a general practitioner, versus a specialist doctor. And it's like, you know, property investing is broad, right? We've talked about that in previous podcasts. You do have residential property investing, but within that, there's so many different ways to do it. You've got property development, you've got commercial, you've got rural, you've got so many different options under the umbrella of property investing. But we specialize, like the, you know, ENT or whatever you want to talk about, from the doctors into just residential houses, and decided to become experts at that one thing, because we realize that if you understand that one thing at the deepest possible level, then that knowledge is transferable and you've got the skill set to be able to do other things from that.
I'm working with a friend of mine who I haven't seen for 20 years. He's been in London working in the IT space. Caught up with him recently when I was down in Sydney, and I was like, this is a crazy idea that I've got, but this idea is I'm just obsessed with data. This is for my own interest and fun. But I've got him looking at every capital city, so that, 8 capital cities I think there are. And then I think there's 11 major regional markets that I want to look at too, with like populations over 100K, like basically everywhere in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. And then I've got every single suburb in every single one of those capital cities or regional markets going into the spreadsheet. So there'll be 5,000, 6,000 suburbs within 60 Ks of each CBD. And then across that, I'm looking at about 20, maybe 30 key performance indicators. And he is pulling this data for me, and I can in immediate time compare 6,000 suburbs in Australia's best markets with the longest term history of price growth across about literally 80 to 100,000 key performance metrics, and find the needle in the haystack. And we've always done that manually, but now with AI and automation, I can bring all of that information into one place and go, this is the most undervalued suburb in a metro or major regional market in Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, Darwin, etc. That is so powerful, because if you understand how to read data like we do, there's one thing that will filter it by, which will literally give us the highest chance of short-term, medium-term success. And we know the market's going to do long-term growth as well.
And it helps when you know that property markets run in cycles. And this is where a lot of investors, fail, is they just buy in their backyards because that's what feels most comfortable. But you need to be a borderless investor. And it's like, we have been really focused on Brisbane because it's in a rising stage of its real estate cycle right now. But come after the 2032 Olympic Games, it'll probably top out, and then we'll have to be looking in other markets at that point in time. And it's like, I look at Sydney right now and it feels as though it's at a peak, if not very close to. And you look at Melbourne, it's in a declining phase of its cycle. So all of these markets operate in different cycles, and you need to be able to identify the market and the suburb that's statistically undervalued compared to where it should be. And it just eliminates a lot of the pressure of identifying the right location. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other things that go into it, like having the local knowledge, understanding the difference between one pocket of a suburb versus another. So you still need that local knowledge, but to get the blueprint or the ideas, the suburbs that on paper are undervalued. And like, that's how we've identified suburbs for the last 9 years. And that's what's enabled us to beat the market average year on year.
Like, if I look at any suburb we've ever bought within the first 5 years of buying it, I just can't remember a suburb that hasn't gone up $200,000 to $500,000. Like, and it's by understanding this one metric that we share with our clients. And it's like, you get education, you get mentoring, you get the relationships, you obviously get the strategy and the plan, but through working with people like us, you also get that obsessive attention. I don't think there's anyone actually doing this. Maybe there's one other analyst that I know that goes that deep, but I don't think anyone in Australia has access to the spreadsheet that we've created. And I think, that's just for fun. That's for my own personal interest.
We just love doing it.
I built this actually for myself and my team, and then I'm like, I'll create a report for clients off the back of this, and then they can get access to it when they want to go and buy the next properties on their own in different areas. Just because it's fun to me. And when investing, I think for everyone listening to this, I hope if it's not already in that like fun hobby category, then I hope that at some point it transitions into that. Like, I remember when you first started in the business before you bought properties, and you were like, I'm doing it. I don't know if I enjoy it, but I'm going to stay with it. And slowly over time, as you get more knowledgeable, more skills, and you start investing yourself and seeing, oh shit, I just made like $100,000 in the last quarter from my properties without coming to work. Like, this is really exciting now.
Yeah, it's life-changing
because it's
stuff.
like, wow, like I can make money while I sleep effectively. It's like it turned into that for you, and it was always been that for me. Like, I got into this and was doing this before I was recording this shit. I was doing this for fun for like 6 to 8 years before 10 years before I'd ever got online. Like, this is just what we do.
I absolutely thank God that it was the right thing as well. Like,
Oh, man.
going into real estate, like in hindsight, is just such a blessing and just the right path. You know, like
What's
you got
leverage
your brother-in-law who's like just so passionate about graphic design and has always been, you know, loves anime and stuff like that and tried to go down that path. But, you know, with AI and just the way the world's heading, it's just, you know, not a very lucrative industry. And that's just the reality of it because of the changes that exist right now. But, you know, real estate always has been, always will be so valuable because God's not creating any more of it. There's only a finite amount of land available. And, you know, with global warming and sea level rising, this is going to be even less of it in the future.
Yeah, there might be a little bit less of it. And the reality is, like, as soon as people recognize that, like, we've built on, like, because I just drove around most of Australia, like, less than 1% of the land space. If people ever realize that, like, there's more than, like, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide, then real estate prices could probably be like 5% of what they are. But the reality is it's always been like this. Like, it's been like this forever since, like, people were fighting over territory close to the water on the Nile 5,000 years ago. It's like, this is what we do. We want the location benefit of Sydney, of Melbourne, of Brisbane. We want to be close to people. We want to be close to the shops, cafes, restaurants. We want to be close to the high-paying jobs with the train line so that we can move about freely. And if you can concentrate strategy on those areas that make sense based on history, the likelihood of those areas that have done well based on history puts you in a high likelihood position to get gains in the future too.
100%. And like, what we're realizing in Southeast Queensland right now is like what we've seen down in Sydney about 20 years ago. It's just like, with that population growth comes just massive changes. And it's like, we had the announcement of the Olympic Games, what was that, like 3-4 years ago now? And they said that they're going to be doing all these projects, but it was just words at the time. And the positive news that we're seeing at the moment, and this is mostly coming through from town planners, is just the infrastructure projects that are being signed off on and expected to break soil. Like,
they'll bring
billions.
50 years worth of infrastructure into the next 8. Like, that was what the Premier wrote years ago. Is like, the main benefit of this is it speeds up Brisbane's trajectory by 50 years.
And what was Pam saying the other day about the potential changes to the zoning around Southeast Queensland, Brisbane in particular?
Like, everything's going to be rezoned.
Yeah.
Not everything, like, actually, big disclaimer there. Everything that matters if you know what you're looking for. Like, to the average person, nothing's going to change at all. No one will even know. But to you and I, the concentrated areas that they're calling like the new satellite cities, and there's probably 4 of them, Moreton Bay, like deep Moreton Bay, like Morayfield, Caboolture, around Redcliffe, like the Redcliffe CB city, they're calling it Ipswich and Logan. Like, those areas, as well as central Brisbane, they're not even going to look the same in terms of zoning in 5 years' time. And then one of the ladies that goes to school, like, she's started to send me text messages now. She's one of the head of planners in Moreton. She's just like, are you on this? Like, the information should come when, like, you know, when people know that that's what you're obsessed with.
And it takes time for the market to revalue this stuff. But like, when you get, say, a 700 square meter block of land, and then that can now be subdivided into 350 square meter blocks, what generally happens is your price per square meter will go up.
Massively.
So even if you don't do the project, the capacity is still there, and you can then sell it on to another investor or developer to do that project. So, you know, the rising tide actually lifts all ships. And even if you don't have the money or you don't have the desire to do the project yourself, the value of your land is naturally going to go up.
100%. Like, you got your piece of land out the back of yours for free.
Yeah.
And, you know, the hundreds of clients that we've worked with that are sitting on the same things at the moment, and that they're not even aware of them, is like, it's effectively exponentially doubled the value of their site. It's very exciting. Like, it's what happens though when there's a high concentration of people living in an area, and Brisbane is so landlocked. Like, I was driving across the bridge the other day actually, and I was looking across to the city, and unlike Sydney and Melbourne, like, Sydney's capped by the mountain range when you hit the Blue Mountains and the water, but it can sprawl like to Queensland pretty much, and sprawl to Victoria. And then it's
But
got 60 Ks, and Melbourne's the same. They've drawn a ring. But Brisbane, you look across the bridge and it's 10
Right
Ks
there.
from the city. It looks like LA.
Yeah.
Like it's just a ring.
Yeah.
And they can't do anything there. And none of those mountains with the sick views have even been developed on yet. But
And
I
there's-
could see that being like the LA hills over time.
And it's not 20 million people that live there like they do in like Southern California.
Yeah.
So it's like there's only 2.7 million people that live in Brisbane, 700,000 on the Goldie, 350,000 on the sunny coast. So they're not going to develop on the other side like they have in the valley of Los Angeles. But it's that close, and you don't recognize it until you're in a high-rise building in Brisbane CBD, or if you do get a chance to like peek out west when you're going over the Gateway motorway and you're finally elevated enough to see how close it is. And like that ring, that horseshoe just creates such scarcity. So you've got the ocean on one side, and then you've got these mountains that can't be developed on the other side. And so what it does is it creates more density in there, which...
And gentrification, because you can't get land. So what do? You either renovate or you knock down and rebuild. And I'm looking at suburbs, for example, like Wavell Heights, that I was buying properties at 5, 6, 7 years ago for clients for what, 500 to 700K, that are now getting brand new places built on them in the right streets for selling them for 3.6 mil.
Scarborough,
Cannon Hill's the same, Scarborough's the same. And so it's like we've gone through the canvas of Brisbane, for example, and we've moved around the city based on this one number that, you know, is as close to a silver bullet with real estate as you can get. And then when you canvass the whole city of 400 suburbs across this number, you'll find that, let's say Manly, a beach, there's a Manly in Brisbane as well for everyone else listening, 16 k's from the city, the second closest beachside suburb, might have done 12% a year for the last 10 years, for example. And then if you know where to look, like south or north, maybe you're like 19 to 25 k's from the city, and you might find a needle in that haystack that's only done 5% a year over the same period of time, which statistically speaking doesn't sound like much, like 12% versus 5 a year, but there's a 70% difference within 3 k's or 10 k's of a beachside area of a capital city in Australia. And so it's like, you could go buy Manly, cool, like
go spend $2 million if you want.
It's already priced in some of the future gains based on previous cycles, where you could buy Thornside. Oh my gosh, like if people knew what is available right now, and then you compare it versus Sydney and Melbourne, and Manly looks dirt cheap. Manly's still too cheap by $1.5 million. It's just exciting. And if you start looking at a city of Sydney, Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, not as a city, but like you said, like as 5 or 6 pockets within a city, and then within those pockets, learn how to find the undervalued suburbs and then overlay the street stuff. Like, I know we're going deep in this one, but just overlaying, okay, we're not buying main roads, we're not buying flood affected, housing commission, mining overlay affected sites. We're not buying next to cemeteries, schools, shopping centres, industrial, commercial. We've mapped the suburb, and we're no longer buying like the cheap stuff, like the cheapest pocket. Then it goes from like a suburb with 10,000 homes or whatever, or 5,000 homes, to a suburb of like 50 viable sites. And once you know where those sites are, you're not just increasing your likelihood by timing the market better and getting the capital city, but like the street, the land size, the house component all contributes to above average gains if you know how to find them.
And this is where investors go wrong. And this is because 70% of Australians own property as their own home, and they're making that decision from an emotional perspective, not a logical, strategic perspective like we do. And because of that, they think that anyone can buy any property and over the long term it's going to work out. And the truth is that that's real. Like if you buy any property in 15 or 20 years from now, it's going to be worth more than what you paid for it. So you will, but it's like coming back to what we were saying. I don't know if it was in the market update or this podcast, starting to get blurred right now, but the difference between like 1 to 2% capital growth compounded over a 15 or 20 year journey on a home that costs you over $500,000 is going to equate to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, depending on the size of your portfolio. So it's like you need to put more weight on the percentage return of investment. So then you're maximizing that percentage return. Like when you look at your super fund, it's like if your super fund's doing like 3% per year, you're going to be pissed off. That's a really underperforming, knowing that the index fund does what, 6 or 7% annually over the long term. So it's like, you think about it when it comes to super or the stock market or the crypto markets, but when it comes to property, people aren't thinking about the percentage return on investment, and it's costing people hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in their investment journey. So it's like, if you're an investor, you need to think like a trader. You need to think like somebody that's investing and maximizing the return on investment, and you need to care about these things if you want that.
Yeah, you're so right. Like, you know, there's a lot of people sitting on a lot of cash at the moment. You could go get 3% with one bank or 6% with the other. That's a no-brainer. But why would you choose a market, Perth, that's averaged 4.2% a year for the, 46-year period that we just looked at with Homely, versus Brisbane that's done 9.7%. Yes, it's shiny. Yes, money's being made right now. Yes, the fundamentals look great. Until the water goes out, and like last time the mining boom ended, 600,000 people bail over to Melbourne, and all of a sudden Melbourne goes through the roof again. Like, it's just understanding the long-term perspective and going, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Perth. Absolutely wish I had bought some properties there 3 years ago. But now that they're on par again with Brisbane in terms of average house price for the same locations in the same city, knowing what happens when the water draws out of that market, it's like risk versus reward. It's completely different. When Perth was $400,000, $300,000 cheaper than Brisbane 3-4 years ago, man, good timing. Now that it's on par, it's like, and Adelaide's on par too, and Canberra's on par, and Melbourne's on par. Like, but Melbourne's got a monster issue with, like, when the international students bail and the tourists bail, it's like, actually there's 500,000 dwellings there too many that they don't need.
It's different in Melbourne and Canberra. So Canberra's so small that like the median house price goes up because it's such a small concentrated geographic area.
And they
Melbourne's
control the land supply.
Yeah, exactly. And Melbourne's the opposite. It's so massive. There's so much land in Melbourne. So
develop it to Bendigo and Ballarat.
It's taking into consideration these regional markets basically. And, you know, that's why their median house price is pulled down. But if you can compare like Canberra to Brisbane to Adelaide to Perth, like Sydney is on its own level, but those other markets, like for like, proximity to the CBD, for land size, for quality of house, Melbourne is still significantly more expensive than Brisbane. So is Canberra. But then when you look at Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, like for like, proximity to the CBD, quality of house, very, very, very similar. It's just, you know, I think because of the larger population, because of the larger population growth, because of the infrastructure redevelopment, because of the fact it's on the eastern seaboard, because Brisbane has the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast and Toowoomba right there as well, you know, like for like, it just has better fundamentals. And that's what history suggests because it's outperformed those other markets.
Yeah, and I suppose like good lesson for us, don't record the market update before we jump straight into a podcast because we've just ranted our heads off. Dataville here. Sorry guys, I think we were talking about science plans for the next few years.
This is relevant to my plans in the next few years as well because it's like I'm trying to capitalize on the most valuable market in the country in my eyes.
You know, what I suppose was trying to get to with all of this, and you absolutely as well, is I love what you said, like, because there was a point in time when we were working in the Coolum office on the sunny coast and we started to get really, really serious about trying to get that extra 1 or 2% per year. Like we always had been. But at that point it was like, no, we think about investing like we do trading or like depositing funds in the bank.
And Brisbane became more of a hotspot at that point as well. So it's like, how can we beat the average?
Yeah, and I just enjoy beating the average for the game of it. Like, yeah, I enjoy the game of trying to make someone more money than they're expecting to make up front. Not for them, like most of our clients don't even have any idea. Like you text people yesterday from like the 150 odd people we worked with in 2019.
I'll let you finish first, but then I'll say.
What was you, like, We just went through like probably 50 clients' properties yesterday and
Yeah.
looked at what we paid for them versus what they're worth loosely now based on
Yeah.
comparables. What was the average gain?
About $300,000, and that was since 2019. So
Yeah.
that was the average as well. There was winners there. Everyone comes in with a budget, and it's like you need to make it
people who
work for your
spent
budget.
400, so we're spending $1 million then.
Yeah, exactly. So the people that got into those areas closer to the city or closer to the beaches, they probably average closer to 400. But yeah, other locations around 3, which is just insane. And the funny thing is every response was, damn, I wish I had have bought more. It's like
I feel that. That's like, I'm like, I know these beaches are going to
This is
blow
hindsight.
up, but I just was being a pussy.
I know,
It's scary.
we get in our own way, and it's like, you do hit servicing limits, but like most of these people, like I could have at the time gone for another one, I just didn't. And now I massively regret not taking action and doing more. And it's just like, we are our own worst enemies 100% of the time, and we just hold ourselves back so much because we get caught in this mind just running catastrophized stories that aren't really true. And it's just like, if you follow the history, if you follow the data, if you take educated action, it's going to work out over the long term.
One of the questions that Dave asked me when we're going for a walk on top of like, what's our plans or what's your plans? Because you and Dave sort of started at the exact same time, 2019.
Yeah.
You've done 4, he's done 3, but he was kind of like, well, because he was like, well, I've got more money in my super fund and I'm thinking about doing something more. Should I look at Perth versus Brisbane? And he said for Brisbane, because he's seen what he's made on the houses that he's bought, and he's like, have I missed the boat in Brisbane, I suppose, which is a similar conversation that we hear every day. Have I missed the boat in Perth? Have I missed the boat in Canberra? I don't know anything about Canberra, but Sydney and Melbourne. And like, it's a common thing. Like almost everyone now knows someone who's made an exceptional amount of money since COVID in property somewhere in Australia. And I said, yes, like this is the answer. Like it's more expensive than it was 5 years ago. And it would be a worse conversation now if it wasn't. Like what would we be even talking about? Like
you wouldn't be buying in Brisbane if you didn't get it.
But what I said to him is now there's 2 Brisbanes. Where there was just one broken into 5 pieces, now there's 2 broken into 5. And the average person wouldn't see it because buying in Brisbane for most people is enough. Buying in Perth for most people is enough. But when you break a Brisbane or a Perth into suburbs that have performed as well as they should have by this stage of a cycle versus the suburbs that for some reason have just been missed, and statistically speaking they're as much as 40 to 70% below where they could be or relative to their neighbours right now. It's like, it's not that you've missed Brisbane, it's just the areas that we looked really good statistically 3 years ago are no longer the areas that you're buying. And it's not that you're going any further from the city, it's just instead of North Brisbane, within 19K from city, maybe now you're looking at North Brisbane at 25 to 40. Maybe instead of buying 8Ks with south or 6Ks south of Brisbane, now you're looking at 19 to 25Ks. And so the opportunity is still there, but out of the 400, 500 suburbs, it's not 300 look amazing by anyone. It's 8 in South Brisbane, it's 6 in West Brisbane, it's 5 in North Brisbane, and it's 12 along the beach. And it's like, if you're not picking the needle, then you're paying not over, you're just paying market rates. And who wants to pay? It's not that you're going to get any bargains in the market. Like there's no such thing as the $100,000 discounted property like COVID. It's more the $100,000 discount by buying this suburb versus that one, and they're next to each other and people don't understand. So they go for like the Cronulla Beach, the St Kilda, the Geelong, the Fremantle, the Manly in Brisbane versus the, hey, like, have you heard about Thornside? It's like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you heard about like...
They're not going that deep into it. And it's just, it's important at this stage of the cycle to make sure that you're picking the eyes out of the market. Like no longer can you just choose blindly. Like you need to be extremely strategic with your purchases to make sure that you do maximize the capital growth potential. But, you know, when I hear stuff like that, I just come back to the AFR review, and it's like, we're now sitting at a median house price in Brisbane of around $880,000. And by the 2032 Olympic Games, 8 years from now, that median house price is expected to be $1.4 million. So it's just like,
What conversation are we having? And
yeah,
why?
it's just like, yes, the goalpost has changed, but do people still see Sydney as like maxed out? Or do you think Sydney is still going to double over the next 15 years? Like, it's just the only constant in life is change. You've got to be willing to adapt to these changes. And just because something's different to where it once was, that doesn't make it undervalued. It just means that your perception of how valuable that suburb is needs to change. It's like, when Apple was selling at $10 a share compared to whatever it is now, $160 a share or whatever, like, is Apple Apple overvalued?
Yes.
Or is it
Probably
I don't
know. I don't know anything about it. Don't listen to me.
Yeah.
I'm not a share guy.
But
Probably
it's just,
not. Relative to 15 years from now.
Exactly. So it's just change your time horizon, and then things will shed a little bit more light.
I like it. I was thinking about another question that Dave asked me, which was, we don't have a crystal ball. We aren't financial advisors. We're not accountants. We're simply licensed property people that invest for ourselves and that turn the passion of doing it for ourselves into helping 2, maybe 3 people a week. But when I sat down with Phil Anderson, who wrote The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking recently with you, like, the dinner was cool, but remember the charts that he pulled up, and this was a missing link of like understanding for me, because a lot of people walk around with a very, very living memory of COVID, 35-40% drop in stocks. The GFC, I talked to 3 people this week who have moved forward with us in the last couple of months that were like, my parents said I shouldn't do this because they haven't done anything since the last GFC. The last GFC, like, no disrespect, but it froze our dad.
Yeah, it did.
He lost $600,000.
He took advice from his accountant and financial advisor at the time who knew nothing about this stuff.
They're just
punters.
I don't know, like, they probably did the best they thought. It's like, but if you're just looking at now and the future, then how can you learn from the past? And
Exactly.
It's like, we get a GFC every 14 to 15 years and have done for 300 years. Like, why wouldn't there be another one when the system hasn't changed? But getting off my rant and back into what I was trying to talk about, there were 2 slides that really made a big impact. So one of them basically had the 14 years up in a cycle, and the other one had the 14 years down.
4 years.
4 years down, sorry, and it had...
And as you said before, it's not 4 years of down. It's normally like 18 months, and then it just stays at the bottom for a bit.
Yeah, like, I found the most incredible chart this week. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it had every capital city in Australia, and it looked at the average return over the last 3 full cycles in the up years.
Which is 60 years of data.
60 years of data, and it found that the average capital city did over 100%, with Brisbane over that time doing over 127% up on average.
Yeah.
And then it looked at the 4 years down. So I know from looking back at the previous GFC style events that the stock market normally drops by 35 to 60% for a period of time and then recovers. And the average property market or property in America drops by as much as 20 to 35%. And I was always like most people, well, I heard about the dude in Noosa that sold his house for a third of what it was worth. I heard about the guy that got in trouble in Bondi Beach and had to sell the $5 million unit for one. They're outlier events that create great stories. Like, who doesn't love like a mining giant falling off and selling his place and then rebuying it back 4 years later? Like, that sells papers. But in the 4 years down in Australia, we're not regulated the same as America. And Sydney and Melbourne did an average of 8% down, and Perth and Brisbane did an average of 12% down. That is so crazy to know for one reason, and that is it costs you more than 12% to buy, hold, sell. So, like, what event?
Yeah, exactly.
In 2017, I saw Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane prices for a period of 6 to 9 months, 12 months drop 15%.
Yep.
In COVID, I saw properties selling for 30% below what like they were worth the year before for a period of 9 months. Like, what are we getting so scared about if we've got a 15-year horizon? As soon as I saw that, I went, enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm not relying. And then when I looked at this 100-year chart literally 2 nights ago, and saw every time the market dropped by between 20 to 60%, the stock market over 100 years in Australia, within 1 to 2 years, it had completely retraced back to its previous level. I'm like, what the fuck is the conversation always about going down for?
Well, the reason it's always about down is because we as human beings attach to the negative stories a lot more so than the positive stories. And we know this in our personal lives. Like, you know, something bad happens and you hold on to it for a much longer period of time compared to if something good happens to you. So it's just human nature.
Yeah,
and
we
it's
hold
like
a negative, 10 times more than a positive? Like
exactly. And
says.
that's why people remember the bad stuff. That's why the media talks about those negative things a lot more than they do the positive things. And it's like, people don't go around flaunting their success stories a lot of the time. Like, you know, even though the positive stories far outweigh the negative stories, like the media and even us and everybody that has a voice focuses on the negative things a lot more frequently, because that's what gets people engaged. That's what gets people listening and
remembering fear state.
But it's like, let's change the narrative. Like, let's start looking at the opportunity. Like, you listen to Alex Hormozy, you listen to all of the successful investors over the years, and they're like, you cannot be a successful business person or investor if you have a pessimistic outlook of life. You can only achieve success in life through business and investing if you have an optimistic view of life, if you believe that the future is going to be better than your present. But if you don't think things are going to change, if you think it's going to get worse, then that's going to become your reality. But if you do truly believe that it's going to get better, and you know, that's what I've expressed today. It's like, I don't know what the future holds. I've got a short-term plan, but I don't know exactly what the long-term plan is, except I am an optimistic person, and I know, based on my work ethic, my discipline, my desire to continue moving forward through life, that the future is going to be better than my current present.
I love that so much. Like, I think one of the big things that I've recognized, like the most controversial thing I say in my day-to-day life when I meet a perfect stranger, like someone at school, someone on a plane, someone wherever, like at the shops, and we're talking, you know, those random conversations that come up, and people ultimately start talking about the future, is like, I'm so excited about the future. I believe that humanity is going to figure everything out like we always have. I believe that the world is a much, much better place than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago. I believe that the average person in the future will have a better life and opportunities than they will in the past. And I know this is all coming, as our sister would say, from like a, you know, white male Australian privileged place, but it's like, I've got to believe that because I've got kids, and I'm not just believing it, like I'm creating it. I wanted to reduce my impact. You know, I fly. I have a Toyota Land Cruiser, but I also put solar on. I've got water tanks. I have like a septic system. Like, I'm, you know, thinking about where I'm buying my produce from, and like reducing some of that stuff from that perspective. And then in the community, we're giving back to charity every single month and every single year.
You do your part.
And it's like, through this, like, I'm trying to encourage people to go, I know how tough it is. Like, I started from nothing. You started from absolutely nothing. Negative. No knowledge, no skills, no network, no money, no plan, no friends that were doing it, no mentors who were doing it, no team of advisors. Absolutely everything that everyone sitting listening to this, thanks for the 5 people, including mum, that's like
that made it this far.
Yeah, but like, it's the reality of like, it is not easy to do it, but it is so worth it.
Yeah.
It is so worth it. Like, it is so worth it for who you become. It's so worth it for the results. It's so worth it for being able to pick your kids up from school. It's so worth it. But it won't be worth it for 5 years or 10 years.
To come back to that, we are privileged.
Yeah.
We are very privileged, and there's no denying that. But not taking advantage of that privilege, like, is that what we should do? Like, should we just, like, you know, go backwards because of our privilege? Like, no, why don't we try and, you know, capitalize on this and expand on this so that we can share these stories and have this podcast where we can motivate people to try and pivot into that direction and pivot into this lifestyle. And then more people have the capacity to give back. More people have the capacity to give to charity. And, you know, the rising tide will lift all ships. And it's just like, you know, I think about it like that. It's like we did start from nothing, but, you know, fortunately I had access to a smartphone. And instead of just watching mindless shit on there, I try and educate myself. Like even this week, I told you, I'm like, I've just fallen down the trap again. Like I fell into the trap of bloody...
the red eyes back.
Yeah, like I'm just scrolling. Like I had a 15-minute timer set for Facebook and Instagram, and I just found myself every single day, deny. And then I'm like, what am I doing? So I downloaded Headspace. And this is a program. It costs $12 per month. What it does is it summarizes every single book on the planet, and then you can read it or listen to it in 15 minutes. And I'm like, well, instead of scrolling on Instagram and Facebook and like watching the reels of people that are making quotes about the books that I'm reading, I'm like, just go straight to the book. And like, I've smashed 3 books this week. It's Thursday.
How was the Twilight series? Was it good? Is it still good?
It was Narnia, not Twilight. It was Narnia. But like, I'm just like, I've got that choice. I can choose to spend that time on Facebook and Instagram mindlessly scrolling through shit that doesn't matter, or I can choose to download Headspace. It cost me $12 per month to buy Headspace, and I get to read an extra 20 books per year. And it's like, yeah, I'm only reading the summarized version of it, so I'm not going that deep, but it's still deeper than a 90-second reel. Yeah. And it's still, if I find interest in the book, I can go and buy the full version and read the whole version.
I love that so much,
it's like,
man.
You've got a choice.
Forever learning.
You've got a choice, and it's just like, who do you want to choose to be?
Yeah. And then, you know, that's probably a perfect segue into like the lesson of this week, which you were talking about before, which probably ties into that. You know, your lesson was really cool from one of my favorite dudes, Brian Tracy.
Yeah.
Brian was a very successful American property developer that became a motivational speaker with Jim Rohn and Dennis Waitley and like Zig Ziglar, like that sort of era, like great old school stuff.
I'll read it straight from the book because like, I think it's just so meaningful. I actually screenshot it and posted on my story, just like, yeah, go motivation.
Put it on the Pumped Instagram page today.
But happiness is success in itself. Most people will tell you that one thing they want in life is to be happy. They don't realize that if you are happy, you're already successful. You can make all the money on the planet, but what's the point if it doesn't bring you happiness? Brian Tracy tells us that human happiness all boils down to one thing, the law of control. When you feel you have control over your life, you feel happy. How happy you are depends on how in control you feel. When you don't feel in control and external factors influence your life, you're less likely to have positive feelings. He then goes to say, true happiness comes from within. Placing your satisfaction in someone else's hands means giving them control. And like, when I read that, it just felt like such a truth bomb that just hit me. And I'm like, thinking about all of the times in my life when I've been unhappy, and it's because I'm putting so much weight on these external influences that I have no control over. And I've been doing this daily Stoic book for such a long time now. I've journaled in it most days per week, and like, it is all about focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you cannot, because like, there's so much, most things in life are completely out of your control. So why sweat about it? Like, just focus on what you can control. Like, I was just like, cool, like, let's get into a good daily routine. Like, let's go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, 7 days a week. Like, let's focus on an 80-20 balanced diet, like more good, healthy food more frequently, less bad, healthy, less bad food, less often. And it's just like a practice of exercise, cardiovascular exercise, weight training as well, and also doing the things that I like. All of these things are in my control. And when I focus on the things that I control, I feel a lot better about the life that I'm leading. So
I like that.
I loved it so much.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, when you read that before we jumped on the podcast, I didn't hear the bit at the top. And I'm like, I like the Brian Tracy bit. I love the bit at the top. Like, it's just beautiful. And I'm glad you did read it, because like, you couldn't paraphrase that properly.
No.
You know, my lesson of the week was, I was just like down the wormhole the other night as well. Like, to be honest with you, if I'm being straight up, like, I've just had a I've just been working so hard on the business at the moment, and to do some of the things that I'm doing takes so much headspace that it's like, it is difficult for me to transition out of that into like, I just walked out of like my home office, which we're recording in today, or the podcast studio, into, hey, like I'm like a dad now. And like pretending that the 6 to 10 hours I just did wasn't like blowing my brain up.
You are a good compartmentalizer.
Yeah.
Like you are, but like, you know, it's so intense, the stuff that you have been doing, and God, it's elevated our business to a whole nother level.
Yeah, but you know, like it's a season too. It's a tiny period.
You only had 6 months off, so like, you know,
exactly.
3 months of hard work.
Like, I've been back working for 8 weeks. I'm like exhausted. I need another holiday.
Yeah, you're not getting one because you're taking over my role, bro, when I go on pat leave. So
for sure, I'm glad you're in all that debt and you've got to come back. Otherwise, I'd be fucked. But yeah,
me too.
Like what I found when I was down the hole the other night is
I love it, down the hole.
I looked at, yeah, it's all the hole. Like it's like it's not, if it's not the present moment, it's the future, the past, which is the fucking black
trap.
hole. But you know what I was like looking at was, I found this 100-year, like year on year, exactly what's happened every single year in the stock market, and there's only been 19 out of 100 years or something, 21 years that have been down. Firstly, I went, okay, 20% of the time, cool, I can stomach that because I don't even care what happens on a year. Then I also, like, I don't care about that. What I care about is what happens in these significant moments, like 1900, the wars, like what happened during the Great Depression, what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis,
dot-com bust,
the dot-com boom, 9/11, GFC, the recession in the 80s where interest rates were at 70%, the wars. And I go, markets shit themselves. People follow people.
And markets generally shit themselves when some form of big external event has occurred. Like you name all of those and it's like wars, Great Depressions, wars, you know, big bubbles that have burst. Like there's always, they call it a black swan event, but Phil doesn't call it a black swan event because he's like, they are predictable and they come all the time.
Yeah. So it's like, what I learned more than anything, and I probably should just started with this, was like, you have declines in the stock market, which everyone is completely aware about, but like every time they come up, forgets.
See that as an opportunity, not
even like how quickly it retraced back to its previous level. So let's say it went down 20%, the likelihood of a year that is exceptional within 2 years of that is almost 100% of the time.
Wow.
Like some years it went down 60% in a period of 18 months. The year after was 69% growth. And so what it gave me was just reaffirmation on the way that we've always talked, and I completely believe. And it's like, if you've got a long-term approach and you're taking a super, 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 super low risk approach to investing by understanding what you're doing before you do it, which is the mistake that I made that you didn't make. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I went and bought places. It all worked out because it was all post GFC in Sydney and Brisbane, but it could have been much worse. For you, we had the plan before you even started to invest. We identified the most undervalued suburbs you could afford, then the streets, and then we just found the perfect properties. And it's like that approach of being long-term with low risk in, you know, I'm not a stock guy, I'm definitely not a financial advisor or accountant, but I'm interested in it like I am property a little bit. And I'm just like,
a little bit, you're obsessed.
It always recovers.
It always recovers.
And so it's like, what are we even talking about? Like 99% of the time, I'm like, just wear it for a year.
Yeah.
And then keep moving forward.
And like so many people fear about that drop, and they're like, that's what holds them back from taking action because they're worried that when they buy, things are going to drop after that. Where it's like, in this other book that I was reading this week, it's like, I don't know any, the author was saying, it was Robert Kiyosaki actually I read the short version of Rich Dad Poor Dad again because I hadn't read it in a while and I was interested to see what the summarized version was going to be. And it was saying, I don't know any successful investor that hasn't lost money first. And it's like, for me with crypto, it's like I jumped on the bandwagon at the peak of the cycle and literally 2 months after I bought it, it dropped by like 80%, and I lost all the money that I put into it. And I'm like, most people would then freak out, sell at a loss, and, you know, just accept I'm a shit crypto trader, I shouldn't do it. But based on the books that I'd read, the lessons that I'd learned, I'd gone, okay, well, do I believe in this asset? Yes. Dollar cost average. Buy at the bottom, and then it rebounded, and now it's back up over 100% since when I bought at the bottom again. So it's like I'm so far in front. It's like, to look, once again, coming back to the optimism versus pessimism, it's like, if you're optimistic, you look at that as an opportunity to go, okay, lesson learned, I fucked up, I followed the crowd and I made a mistake, let's fix my mistake, rather than going, okay, I followed the crowd, I'm a terrible investor, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve wealth, I don't deserve success, so I'm just going to sell out and cop the loss. It's just like, once again, it's a choice. Which path do you want to take?
I love it, man. Like, I've really actually enjoyed this podcast. Like, for me, this is the stuff that I'm truly passionate about. Like, I'm really just passionate about two things in terms of learning. One is investing, business, personally, and the second is like philosophical, spiritual. And that's where I spend all of my time. And I feel like this has ebbed and flowed between the two things I love. And like, you know, it's not always going to come from us in the perfect way, because we're freestyling here like mum spaghetti.
I've seen somebody the other day, their review is like, oh, they just don't go deep enough. And I'm like, well, we do for paid clients. We just don't for free online.
Yeah, we go, I'll tell you what, we go pretty deep over 3 to 6 months, one-on-one with 2 people a week.
Exactly.
They get stuff that is never going to come online, but, you know, that's also part of this. But
it's also nice to just sit down with your brother and have a yarn and have a chat about things that we care about. And it's like, I'm so grateful that people love listening to this stuff, and the audience is growing, and the feedback has been great from the majority of people, and you just can't please everyone. But it's just, you know, I just feel so fortunate that we have this platform and that we have this space, and Sam's willing to stand there for 2 hours and film us and listen to us talk shit.
Nah, man, I love you so much.
Hello, welcome.
Basically, guys, for those of you who are still listening and are thinking about buying an investment property in the next 3 to 6 months, we would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. You can book that over at www.pumpedonproperty.com. My puppy's going off here.
If you're not watching this on YouTube right now,
there's a dog licking Simon's face and Simon's sticking tongue out.
Oh, I love you too.
But basically, we can talk about where you are right now. We'd like to be longer term. We can educate you on the market from that incredible piece of OCD madness that we've just created, where we're looking at all of these suburbs and all of these different indicators, and then we can point you in the right direction, and you can go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the 2, maybe 3 new clients that we take on each week. But either way, we hope you're enjoying these longer format videos, podcasts. We certainly are. If you haven't already done so, please give this a review. I just talked to a podcast lady and she said reviews help. Thank you again, Mum, for chucking something up. But no, we're super excited, guys, to continue bringing you this sort of stuff and helping you ultimately build your portfolio with more confidence so that you can move towards financial freedom sooner. But we wish you all the best, and have a great day.
Woo, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice.